Hello everyone. Today I am going to start with the first chapter of class 12, that is reproduction in organisms. So all of you know what reproduction is and why is it suggested as the fundamental basic attribute of life, isn't it? So beginning with the definition, all of you know that reproduction is basically a process by which the new organisms are going to be created out of the existing ones, isn't it? Now, this process becomes a fundamental and a very important attribute of life, that is only because without reproduction, no species can continue existing in this living world. Because after all, every organism is here for only a limited period of time. Death is the ultimate destination for all. So in that case, before death occurs, the organisms, they have to make sure that they produce some similar kinds so that the species can exist. And that is done by reproduction. That's why reproduction becomes so very important, a basic attribute of life. Alright? So in this chapter, reproduction in organism, we are going to be discussing everything like related to reproduction, like the types of reproduction, or what are the basic important events associated with reproduction. But before we start or move further, there is a very important term that we must learn first, because that might be used many a times while we discuss the unit of reproduction, and that is lifespan. So lifespan, the period from birth to natural death of an organism is referred as lifespan. Do mark here, we are talking here about natural death. There may be so many other factors that might lead to the death of an organism, but we here, when we discuss about lifespan, we are strictly going to discuss about, or we are going to take into consideration the lifespan, the period from birth to natural death of an organism. Alright? Now, so it comes to be as such, it is the period from birth to natural death of an organism. Now there is a very important thing to learn regarding the lifespan, and that is the lifespan does not depend on the size or complexity of an organism. The lifespan, like suppose if you might be thinking sometimes that if an organism is very simple or primitive or have a very simple organization, it will have a shorter lifespan, or else if an organism is very advanced or it is much more complex or it is very large in size, in that case it might be having a much larger lifespan. There is no as such correlation. There is nothing to do with size or complexity of an organism with relation to its lifespan. For example, to make it more clear to you, say we take the example of a crow and a parrot. Both have kind of the similar size or similar complexity, but then as per lifespan, the lifespan of a crow is only 15 years, whereas for that of a parrot is 140 years. So that much of a huge difference they possess. Likewise, not only in animals but in plants as well. Like plants are mostly known to possess large lifespans, isn't it? Like plants like banyan or eucalyptus, they might have a lifespan which is around 100 or thousands of years. Likewise, but in plants as well, this differentiation remains. Like for example, in a mango tree, the lifespan is around 200 years, but for a tree like people, the lifespan can go beyond 2500 years. Okay, so there is nothing as such related to size and complexity with the duration of lifespan of an organism. This is a very important point to be marked. Now, be it whatever the lifespan of an organism, one thing but remains constant, that is death. Sooner or later, all organisms, they are going to die. and that's why all living organisms are mortals. Alright? All living organisms are mortals. All of you agree about it? About this particular point? If you all agree, then I must point at one particular thing, that biology is finally a science of exception, and that's why even to this rule there is exception. That means there are certain organisms which might be very well referred as immortals as well. Now, what can be such an organism which never dies or which are immortals? Such organisms are nothing but certain unicellular organisms which undergo binary fission. In binary fission, as all of you know, a parental cell will divide into two daughter cells. So, while the two daughter cells are being formed, is it that any part of the parent is left to die? No, right? So if there is no part of the parent left to die, in that case, we can say that the parent has now started living in the form of two daughter cells, and hence the parent does not die. So in that case, all those organisms which undergo binary fission can very well be referred as immortals. Alright? Fine. So that much regarding the lifespan. Now you have to note about a few important lifespan of different organisms, which are as follows. Lifespan. The shortest lifespan is of a mayfly, which has a lifespan of only a single day, 1 day. It's also referred as 1 day insect. Next, for a butterfly, it is around 1 to 2 weeks. For a fruit fly, it is 2 weeks. For rice plant, it is around 3 to 4 months. Next, say for example, in case of banana, it is around 25 years. Or say for a horse, it is around 60 years. For human, well, theoretically or in pen and paper, we take it to be 100 years. But then, because there are many factors which are applicable, so that's why it well ranges from 70 to 100 years. So these are a few important lifespans. You can note it down. Now moving to our next topic, that is types of reproduction. So there are two broadly categorized types of reproduction. Asexual and sexual. A sexual method of reproduction, it's a very simple and fast mode of reproduction which is mostly seen in simpler organisms, okay, or the organisms which have simple organization. Fine. So there are certain important characteristics of asexual mode of reproduction which are as follows. First, asexual mode of reproduction is uniparental. That means this mode of reproduction is mainly conducted by a single parent. Alright, a single parent. There are no two parents involved in this process of reproduction. Next, being uniparental, the process is not going to involve gametic fusion. Gametic fusion or syngamy is going to be absent. Alright? Now, next thing that is very, very important is that because here there is no gametic fusion, of course, genetic recombination is absent. Also, because genetic recombination is absent, that's why we can very easily say that the daughter cells or progeny that is being formed in the sexual mode of reproduction, they are not going to be anyhow different from each other. Rather, they are going to be identical, and they are so identical that we can refer them as clones. So, progeny are going to be identical, or they are going to act as clones. So these are the most important points which are to be remembered regarding the characteristics of asexual mode of reproduction. Now let us start with a few processes or methods of asexual mode. So methods of asexual reproduction, first thing that is the most prevalent is fission. Fission is a simple process in which the parental cell divides into daughter cells. Now, into how many daughter cells it would divide into, accordingly, fission can be of two types, that is binary fission and multiple fission. Binary fission, the term bi itself means two. So in this process of fission, the parental cell will divide into two daughter cells. Parental cell divides into two daughter cells. Now, in binary fission again, there is something that is very important for you to understand. Binary fission, the entire parental organism or the parental cell is going to behave as a reproductive unit. And as the cell division occurs, the daughter cells will be formed. So in that case, those organisms which undergo binary fission, for them, the reproduction process and the cell division process are synonymous events. They are going to be similar events. Okay? Now, binary fission in which the parental cell divides into two daughter cells, that can be again divided into three different categories according to the plane of division, like asymmetrical binary fission. In asymmetrical binary fission that occurs in case of amoeba. The amoeba, the cell itself is asymmetrical or irregular. So while the amoeba cell divides into two daughter cells, there is no fixed plane of division. The division can occur via any plane. So we call it simple binary fission or asymmetrical or irregular binary fission. So this will be happening in case of amoeba as such. The amoeba will first withdraw its pseudopodia as it begins to divide, then first nuclear division will take place, or we can say karyokinesis takes place, and eventually cytokinesis will also take place. And we have two daughter cells which are identical to each other or are clones to each other. This is going to be known as asymmetrical or simple binary fission. Here the plane of division is going to be from any plane. Now next is longitudinal. Longitudinal binary fission. Here the plane of division will be as per the longitudinal axis, which occurs in case of, like this was amoeba, so it occurs in case of euglena. In euglena, the plane of division is roughly going to be like this. So longitudinally the cell will divide into two daughter cells. Like this, it is going to divide into two daughter cells. So because the plane of division is going longitudinally, that's why it's longitudinal binary fission. So example is euglena. The third one is going to be transverse binary fission. Transverse binary fission will be occurring in paramecium. Here the plane of division is going to be transverse. Paramecium is the example. So this is about the different types of binary fission. The next topic is multiple fission. So after binary fission, now we are going to discuss about multiple fission. Multiple means many. So in that case, in this type of fission, the parental cell will divide into multiple daughter cells. Like in binary fission, two daughter cells. In multiple fission, multiple or many daughter cells. In multiple fission, first, the parental cell will undergo various rounds of karyokinesis, giving rise to many nuclei, and eventually each of these nuclei will get surrounded by thin peripheral cytoplasm, thus giving rise to multiple daughter cells. Eventually, all these daughter cells are going to be released by rupture of the parental cell. So the parental cell will eventually rupture and all these daughter cells will be released. This would be taking place in case of Plasmodium. Plasmodium, that is the malarial parasite. Okay, so this is about fission. Now next method that we're going to discuss is budding. Budding is a kind of a process in which a small outgrowth called bud will be formed in any side of the cell or body of the organism. Now this bud would remain attached to the parental cell for a while and then it will detach and act as a new organism. Like it will become more clear from this diagram. Budding is very commonly observed in yeast. So say this is a yeast cell where during budding at one side of the cell a small projection like this, outward projection called bud would be formed. Eventually nuclear division or karyokinesis will take place and one of the daughter nucleus will move into the bud. Finally, there will be an inward constriction at the base that will allow the bud to separate from the parental cell. This is how the separation would take place, and once separated, this bud would then grow into a new individual. Now, one very important factor related to budding which differentiates the process of budding from fission is that in fission, the cytoplasmic division that takes place is going to be equal among the daughter cells and the parental cell will not be existing anymore after the process is done. But in budding, the cytoplasmic division, as you can see, is unequal and the parental cell is going to remain. So this is a very, very important differentiation between the fission and budding process. So now we're going to discuss the third one, that is sporulation. Sporulation or spore formation. Sporulation and spore formation is another very important method of asexual reproduction which is commonly found in algae or fungi. Okay? So now there are various different types of spores that can be observed in the living world, but we are going to take into consideration two very important examples. The first one being a zoospore. Yeah. So this is called budding, which we have discussed related to yeast. Now one very important factor related to budding which differentiates the process of budding from fission is that in fission the cytoplasmic division that takes place is going to be equal among the daughter cells and the parental cell will not be existing anymore after the process is done. But in budding, the cytoplasmic division, as you can see, is unequal and the parental cell is going to remain. So this is a very, very important differentiation between the fission and budding process. So now we're going to discuss the third one, that is sporulation. Sporulation or spore formation. Sporulation and spore formation is another very important method of asexual reproduction which is commonly found in algae or fungi. Okay? So now there are various different types of spores that can be observed in the living world, but we are going to take into consideration two very important examples. The first one being a zoospore. A zoospore is an endogenous spore. Endogenous spore means a spore that is formed inside a particular structure that's called the sporangia. So in case of zoospore, it is going to be formed inside a sac-like structure that's called zoosporangia. Inside each zoosporangia, 4 to 8 zoospores are formed. Each zoospore is going to be biflagellated and hence motile. So in that case, their dispersal medium is going to be water. Commonly, zoospore is going to be formed in most algae. It is the most common type of spore formed in most algae, and among fungi it will be formed in certain lower fungi or aquatic fungi like albugo or phytophthora, etc. So a few examples, if you want to note it down, you can write albugo, phytophthora among the fungi, and Chlamydomonas among algae. Now, the second one is Conidia. Conidia is going to be formed in specialized hyphal structure called conidiophore. This is the conidiophore in which the conidia are going to be born. Now, conidiophore is going to show various orders of branching, like there can be rami, metula and sterigmata that would be required or that would be present, eventually bearing at their tip chains of spores known as conidia. One most important difference between zoospore and conidia would be that zoospores are inside a sporangia, that's why they're endogenous, whereas for conidia, as you can see, they are going to be directly exposed and not inside any structure. So in that case, they are going to be exogenous. So that's the main difference. This is endogenous spore, this is exogenous spore. Example can be Penicillium, Aspergillus, etc. These are all higher fungi. Now, next we are going to discuss the process of fragmentation. fragmentation is a process which again is very much prevalent in fungi. Regarding fragmentation, you must know that in fragmentation, the body of the organism is going to divide into two or multiple or more pieces or fragments. These fragments then would give rise to a new individual. So this is again going to be very common among some fungi like Rhizopus, Agaricus, etc. Fragmentation, again I am repeating, fragmentation is a process in which the parental body is going to divide into several fragments, and each fragment is going to give rise to new individual. It's very common among fungi like Rhizopus and Agaricus. Algae like Spirogyra or Hydra. So these are certain important methods of asexual reproduction that we have discussed today. The next topic in our next class, we are going to discuss vegetative propagation. These are asexual methods of reproduction in plants. Thank you.